Peace, y'all. It's your boy Killer B, the goddamn witch finder general. Got a witch, I'm burning their asses up. I got a good show for y'all tonight. Diet and nutrition of 19th century Negro slaves in the United States. I've been waiting a while and stuff to do once I finally had some time to share this information with y'all. I'm sure you find it pretty interesting. So hold tight. I'm going to get in this new track by Josh. Shout out to Josh again and stuff. Always keeping me lit over here with the new tracks. So no, I haven't been on a while, so I don't expect y'all to be really be watching me tonight. But you know, I'm gonna get this thing out of the way anyway. So peace and blessings to everybody, and I'll be right back with you. Peace.
Y'all know what it is. Yeah. Feel the pressures of everyday living. Yeah. Wondering what a system will be given. Driven to do better. Break us from these chains and fetters. Regretter when I could have did something positive. And I didn't. Like many out here swimming. Gotta lie around. Realize power in your crown. Understand and teach. Wipe away the little child's frown. You know how I get down. Bring the truth. Tighten what's loose. Spread mercy. Even if you refuse. We got breath. We got next. We got Jews. Written throughout numerous generation texts. I don't need to be like, but there will be respect. Yes, sir. Talk with your highness on the daily. Tell me workplace is crazy.
Hold on. We gotta bring that back, Josh. We gotta bring that back. I don't think y'all listen. You might not be listening now. What's up? Why is this thing gonna start? Fuck. 1 second. Something on.
Y'all know what it is. Yeah.
Hey, P. Good to see you.
Feel the pressures of everyday living. Yeah. Wondering what a system will be given. Driven to do better. Break us from these chains and fetters. Regretter when I could have did something positive. And I didn't. Like many out here swimming. Gotta lie around. Realize power in your crown. Understand and teach. Wipe away the little child's frown. You know how I get down. Bring the truth. Tighten what's loose. Spread mercy. Even if you refuse. We got breath. We got next. We got Jews. Written throughout numerous generation texts. I don't need to be like, but there will be respect. Yes, sir. Talk with your highness on the daily. Tell me workplace is crazy. I say unite and do something amazing. Caught up in your emotions, you get lazy. Get lazy, man. Don't want to become the devil's plaything. They say Josh is a Christian. They say he lacked power-wide vision. Nah, y'all done changed the scriptures. Moses water drop. Nourishing my crops, saving lots, respect the Dama on top. Y'all lost, that's why I'm biding my time. You know it's filthy crime. You should respect the mind, the grind, as we better our economy. Do it. Transform a party system folly. No illegal robbing. I get judicial as a nation. I don't care if you choose plants or bacon. Still gonna feel these changes. Still rearranging scenery, connery. Canaries honoring, prepare me. Lose you devils with a well-placed rhyme. Suleiman wisdom, continue to drop dimes. Drop them, alright then. Drop them. Limes go well with my lily koi produce. Expose you fools who continue to want the noose. You approach with caution like I'm a moose, but really on your own island like goose. Prepare for the onslaught. The voodoo in the malt drop. Drink it poured out on the new nation. Magnetic field shift into place. All praises. Yeah.
Once again, that was Josh. A new track by him called Shine, Shine, Shine. Got my homegirl P up in the building. Happy now. All right, now. P up in here. Yeah, P. We get it popping tonight. And this is a good one. Not gonna try to be too long. got some pretty interesting information. I was originally going to do a show on slavery in Harvard University, but I might do that tomorrow. I was holding on the back burner for a little bit longer. Y'all let me know in the comments and stuff. Y'all interested in that. This one I've been sitting on for quite a while. I've been wanting to do. So there's always been like in history, they said like, well, I don't really know like in history because I'm never reading any history books speaking on this, but just how could I say it? The black, I guess, oral tradition or the way we communicated with ourselves orally, things that went on back then. And some of the stuff is actually handed down orally through generations. Some of the stuff has been presented to us by Afrocentric scholars, you could say. And we'll get down to some of the facts, some of the things that might not be too much of a fact, or you know what I mean, not quite. So we're gonna try to look at a little both sides of the fence a little bit, and we're gonna see today some of the reasons and where slaves, the diet of the slaves, were these people given proper food to live? It's going to be something else that's going to be real interesting that came up that I never heard of. I'm going to let y'all, when I hit it, then you guys can talk about it a little bit. But was these slaves given adequate food for them to live? You know what I'm saying? Healthy lives and stuff. So we're going to just get into the information. Let's just get into the shit. Too long. But first, I want to read this article on Booker T. Washington. Some of the things that Booker T. Washington spoke about slavery and the food, the types of food, how they attained the food, how they prepared the food when they ate the food and stuff. So we're gonna get into a little bit of that first. I'll be giving out these PDFs that I'm reading. I probably won't read everything entirely tonight, so you guys are gonna have a lot more to study and stuff on this subject, sources and stuff that I'm using tonight. Start reading him, Booker T. Washington. About his kitchen, growing up as a slave. And a lot of this information is coming from his autobiographical book called The Story of My Life and Work and Up from Slavery. All right, so Washington wrote about the kitchen cabin where he lived with his mother, brother, and sister. The cabin was not only our living place, but it was also used as the kitchen for the plantation. My mother was the plantation cook. There was no wooden floor in our cabin, the naked earth being used as a floor. In the center of the earthen floor, there was a large, deep opening covered with boards, which was used as a place to store sweet potatoes in the winter. An impression of this potato hole is very distinctly engraved upon my memory because I recall that during the process of taking them out, I would often come into possession of one or two, which I roasted and thoroughly enjoyed. There was no cooking stove on our plantation, and all the cooking for the whites and slaves my mother had to do over an open fireplace, mostly in pots and skillets. The family got their meals like dumb animals get theirs. It was a piece of bread here and a scrap of meat there, a cup of milk at one time, and some potatoes at another. Sometimes a portion of our family would eat out of the skillet or pot, while someone else would eat from a tin plate. Excuse me. Held on the knees using nothing but hands to hold the food. All right. For breakfast, the usual diet for slaves was cornbread and pork. Washington wrote that he did not see very much of his mother since she had to leave her children early in the morning to begin her day's work. The early departure of my mother often made the matter of the securing my breakfast uncertain. This led to my first intimate acquaintance with animals. He went on to describe that it was the custom to feed boiled Indian corn to the cows and pigs. At the time when I had failed to get any other breakfast, I used to go to the places where the cows and the pigs were fed and make my breakfast off the boiled corn, or else go to the place where it was the custom to boil the corn and get my share there before it was taken to the animals. If I was not there at the exact moment of feeding, I could still find enough corn scattered around the fence or the trough to satisfy me. So different accounts exist as to the number of meals slaves had daily, right? So George Washington Carver says like his mother went out to work real early, so he had to fend for himself for his early morning breakfast, where he would go out to where they was feeding the livestock and take of the livestock's food, or if he's late getting there, eat the scraps that are left over, that the animals have left, or couldn't get to because they fell on the other side of the fence or something, right? It's crazy. And one of the earliest recollections is that of my mother cooking a chicken late at night and awakening her children for the purpose of feeding them. How or where she got it, I do not know. I presume, however, it was procured from our owner's farm, but people may call this theft. But taking place at the time it did, and for the reason it did, no one could ever make me believe that my mother was guilty of thieving. She was simply a victim of a system of slavery. Booker T. Washington once saw two of the young mistresses on the Burroughs plantation eating ginger cakes, the visitors to the plantation. He said that at that time, those cakes seemed to be absolutely the most tempting and desirable things that I have ever seen. And I then, and there resolved that if I ever got free, the height of my ambition would be reached if I could get to the point where I could secure and eat ginger cakes in the way that I saw those ladies do. Washington later described the food shortages on the plantation during the Civil War due to the blockades and how it affected the owners much worse than the slaves. The owners had gotten used to eating expensive items prior to the war, and the slaves were barely affected by lack of these items. Archaeologists have recovered detailed information on living conditions during the period of slavery. Findings include information on housing, use of space, foodways, household equipment, personal possessions, and sometimes information on healthcare and hygiene. Some records kept by planters on food, clothing, and other atonements argument that archaeological discoveries, faunal remains and excavations have confirmed that livestock such as pigs and cows were the principal components of slaves' meat diets. Other sites show remnants of wild species such as opossum, raccoon, snapping turtle, deer, squirrel, duck, and rabbit. This evidence suggests that slaves supplemented the rations given them by their owners. Other sites contain lead shot, gun flints, and gun parts, providing that some slaves had access to firearms. Other excavations include oyster shells, lead fishing weights, fishing hooks, fish bones and scales, tracing the walnut, grapes, blackberries, and hickory nuts have also been found as evidence that would be part of slave diet. Some forms of meat were usually used in soups, stews by enslaved people. These not one-pot meals would combine meat, vegetables, and broth, stretching out the meal proportions. This style of simmering meals over an open fire emulated West African cuisine, which relies heavily on stewed meals. Maize, rice, peanuts, yams, dried beans were found as important staples of slaves on some plantations. West Africa before uh, and after European contact, keeping the traditional stew cooking could have been a form of subtle resistance to the owner's control. A potato hole or root cellar may also have been a sign of resistance to the slave owners. Archaeologist Bill Kelso reported that many of these pits in Tidewater in Piedmont, Virginia, may have been a product of Black culture. Archaeologist Anne Elizabeth Yentz suggests that the practice of storing valuables in pits may have African origins. Here, interpretations are based on an English sea captain who observed the Igbo people of southeastern Nigeria storing valuables under the floors of their houses in the 19th century. Approximately 40 to 60% of the Africans imported to Virginia were Igbo. And according to Yentz's interpretation, the archaeologist Doug Sanford says that they should not be used as marker for African American presence because they are found among other cultures. However, they do suggest a means of defining space and status, reflecting a method of day-to-day resistance. Some owners raised the cabins containing these root cellars off the ground, thwarting the slaves' attempt to create their own personal space and sense of place within their plantation. Wow. Huh. So they would tear down, they would catch a slave having one of these potato holes. Like, you know what I mean? Like the slave is getting their own sense of independence. Or like, you know what I mean? Like everything that slave wants has to come from that master, or is going to come from. You know what I mean? So that would put the master at like, oh, well, like we don't really need this motherfucker. Like, we could just act like he doing this shit, but we got all this extra shit going on here that he don't know about. So once he finds that, he was like, yo, these motherfuckers is cheating the game. Like, you know what I'm saying? These motherfuckers, oh, you think you gonna eat off my fucking ass and shit? No, motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? That's just crazy. Wow. But yeah, that's bugged out. All right. So I got more. I got more. This is the lightest stuff that I'm reading now. I get to the other stuff here. Plantation. All right. Okay. All right. William D. Du Bois, a sociologist, civil rights activist, and contemporary for Booker T. Washington, published a monograph of the health and physique of the Negro American. It was one of the series of research studies published throughout the Atlanta University. In May 1906, health professionals reviewed Du Bois' research, calling the local health leagues to provide information about preventive medicine and urging excuse me, existing health organizations to create programs addressing health care needs of African Americans. They passed a resolution stating that they did not find any inadequate scientific warrant for the assumption of the Negro race is inferior to other races and the physical build of vitality. The present differences in mortality seem to be sufficiently explained by conditions of life. All right, excellent. We get to this. I gotta share my screen for this one. I'm going to be reading from Choking. The feeding of slave population in the United States, the Caribbean, and Brazil. Some remarks in the state of art. By Ramiro Alberto Flores Guzman. Right? We're only going to read parts about the United States. We might hit on some of the other stuff. Okay. Screen here. Cool. Let me get you a link for this. All right. There's the link for that first guy right here. Dang it. Oh, there. Okay. Put in the chat. All right. There's the link for the first article. I'll put the next one in after this one. All right. All right. Oops. Dang it. Get out the bag. Ah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Make you wipe your feet when you come up in here. All right. Check. All right. Food is not only a necessary constituent for life, since it provides energy and material for the formation of living tissue, but also an important source of enjoyment and remarkable indicator of economic, social, and cultural differences among human communities. The importance of food and the construction of social differences was already perceived by the French. Yeah, you know what? Let's skip down. All right, get to that. Yeah. Oh shit! Why is that doing that? That's crazy. Oh, okay. No. All right. Study of food consumption patterns and slave populations is one of the most challenging topics of the historiography about slavery in the New World. For a long time, it was taken for granted that captives were maltreated and poorly fed by the masters in almost every place of the America. This belief was backed by abolitionist literature, whose anti-slavery discourses emphasized the extremely poor living conditions of captives to justify the legal halt of slavery. That's very interesting right there. Now it says the belief was backed by abolitionist literature, whose anti-slavery discourses emphasized the extremely poor living conditions of captives to justify the legal halt of slavery. So it was saying like these abolitionists in their literature, they was putting the most extreme stuff in there, almost like you would see. I could assume that it was to the degree, like what they were doing was great. I'm not taking nothing away from what they was doing. I'm just saying the techniques that they use to get their word across or to get whatever thing that they need to do, laws passed or whatever. They had to show people the worst conditions. So almost just like how PETA, right? Go to somewhere and protest animal cruelty. Now they're gonna show you the craziest shit. Like they're gonna tell you, okay, how they process chickens, right? And they might not even do that anymore. They'll show you some pictures from damn near 50 years ago when there weren't laws against certain stuff. So they'll still show you that on the ignorant person that doesn't know that, hey, they're not doing it like that anymore. But that visual is what they need to get their point across. They're just using it for that visual. You know what I mean? They're not even going to tell you that they don't do it like that. See what they do to animals? Like, you know what I mean? So I could imagine what the abolitionists were doing, right? On the basis of the literary evidence, the historical community tended to accept as a fact the idea that slaves actually lived on the edge of malnutrition, right? So it says, in 1974, the economic historian Robert W. Fogel and Stanley L. Ingerman published a very controversial book titled Time on the Cross that challenged most of the former scholarly about slavery, and special the widespread belief on the malnutrition of captives. Their argument was highly provocative. Food consumption of North American slaves was greater than that of free men at the eve of the Civil War. That's an ill statement right there. So it's saying the North American slaves, Negro slaves, were in a better condition. It says greater, the food consumption of the North American slaves was greater than that of a free man at the eve of the Civil War. Even more, they hypothesized that slave diet exceeded modern recommended daily levels of chief nutrients. Not surprisingly, the book received a great deal of criticism from scholars and political advocates of African American rights that accused both officers of doing an unethical defense of slavery system. Say all the African American, the African American rights people and other scholars and political advocates of African American rights, right? They all came out against these people for trying to make a defense of slavery. It says, behind the political implications of their study, the Fogel and Egerman's book not only reopened a controversial issue on American history, but also posed new methodological questions that greatly enriched academic debate and aid to promote new research projects that are shifting the common ideas about nutrition of slaves in the United States. The issue of slave diet has also been object to study in other slavery societies in the Americas. In the case of Brazil, there is a vast historiography related to captives' food consumption, mostly done for local research. On the other hand, U.S. historians made remarkable contributions to the knowledge of nutritional conditions of former English and French Caribbean slaves. Much more modest has been the intellectual interest in exploring the situation of slaves in Spanish dominion, with exception of Cuba. Now, I don't know if that was in this or something else I was reading. I didn't read all this shit, just to let y'all know. I'm reading some of this shit is new to me. So I'm reading. They're saying that in Brazil, they didn't hold records of what they was giving slaves. Like, you know what I mean? All their records, okay, we giving the slaves this much this much this every week or every month for them to live or do whatever they got to do. Like, this is what we got to provide them. Maybe one pair of shoes like a year or 3 shirts or something like that. In Brazil, they didn't hold records like that. But in the Americas, the Americans kept, you know what I'm saying, a lot of records on this stuff. The topic of slave nutrition attracted a great deal of interest from historians seduced by the Marxist ideas and exploitation and dominion relationships between the 60s and 80s. And although historical attention has receded significantly in the recent years, there is still place for research to be done in this area. In this regard, the current article explores the state of the art about slave nutrition in 3 regions of the Americas: the United States, the Caribbean, and Brazil. More than a simplistic account of historical findings, this paper analyzes the methodological issue that historians face when dealing with problematic data about feeding patterns of slave population, as well as obstacles to tackle a comparative study of slave nutrition and the continental level. Other questions discussed here is the parameters to measure what an adequate feeding is, since the specific demand of nutrients in human beings greatly value and function of age, sex, and daily activity performed. Finally, the article examined the dietary regimen of expectant mothers and children to seek probable response to the high rates of infant mortality among slave populations. And we're going to read, there's been a lot of death in the slaves, with the slaves. They said, what was it, 60%, if I can remember, out of, or 30, yeah, I remember it was 350 babies out of 1,000 that died. Out of every 1,000 slave child that is born, 350 of them are going to die before they're 1 year old. That was the statistic. And they're going to explain why, a lot of the reason why that happened. Quantity and quality of slave diet. In the beginning, the intellectual debate on slave nourishment was plagued of moral and political consideration about American slavery society. Not surprisingly, former researchers tackled the issue from a subjective point of view. Hunger sensations, such question divided the academia into opposite sides aligned to divergent political agendas. Thus, for the opponents of slavery system, it was clear that slaves lived in a permanent state of hunger due to the poor food allowances offered by their masters. In order to support their claim, they published several testimonies that describe the slave owners' immoral practice of depriving food for the captives. One of the most famous testimonies is this regard to that of anti-slavery activist, the former slave Frederick Douglass, who related his personal experience to dramatic terms. Not to give a slave enough to eat is regarded as the most aggravated development of meanness, even among the slaveholders. The rule is, no matter how coarse the food, only let there be enough of it. This is the theory in the part of the Maryland from which I came. It is the general practice, though there are many exceptions. Master Thomas gave us enough of neither coarse nor fine foods. There were 4 slaves of us in the kitchen: my sister Lisa, my aunt Priscilla, Henny, and myself. And we were allowed less than a half of a bushel of cornmeal per week. A very little else, either in the shape of meat or vegetables. It was not enough for us to subsist upon. We were therefore reduced to the wretched necessity of living at the expense of our neighbors. This we did by begging and stealing, whichever came handy in a time of need, the one being considered as legitimate as the other. A great many times we poor creatures been nearly perishing with hunger, when food in abundance lay moldering in the safe and smokehouse, and our pious mistress was aware of the fact. Yet that mistress and her husband would kneel every morning and pray that God would bless them and bask in his store. It says a similar autobiographical story was recounted by the ex-slave Charles Ball, who refers to customary food ways of captives in Maryland. As I was very obedient and ready to execute all his orders from his master, I did not receive much whipping. but suffering greatly for want of sufficient and proper food. My master allowed his slaves a peck of corn each per week, although the year, and this we had to grind into meal in the hand mill for ourselves. We had a tolerable supply of meat for a short time. About the month of December, when he killed his hogs after the season, we had meat once a week, unless bacon became scarce, which very often happened, in which case we had no meat at all. In antebellum America, these stories were widely publicized by abolitionist activists to prove how slave owners neglected the feeding of their slaves. On the other side, the advocates of slavery system alleged that most slaveholders were benevolent masters concerned about their slaves' welfare. The most representative author of this conservative point of view was Ulrich Bonnell Phillips, who pursued to demonstrate that slavery was a progressive social institution well suited in the Southern character. Wow. As evident in former debate around slave feeding was tackled by the subjective angle of hunger sensations, basis of literary testimonies fueled by partisan politics. By mid-20th century, the controversy acquired a more scientific tone than when historians began to analyze the slave diet from a quantitative approach. New pieces of evidence would demonstrate that most captives did not experience crude hunger sensation, but severe pictures of specific dietary deficiencies. In other words, slaves probably were supplied with a sufficient food allowance to satisfy their appetite, but such ration was far being balanced in nutritional terms. Thus, the question of slave nourishment was not an issue of quantity, but a problem of quality and variety. According to different sources, the typical diet of a male working slave consisted of 3.5 pounds of salt pork, 1 peck of corn meal per week, supplemented with some vegetables and fruits. This daily ration was largely deemed as misbalanced for both contemporary witnesses and modern scholars due to that it barely met the nutritional requirements of captives. The probable consequence of such feeding regimen based on monotonous diet was the remarkable augment of cases of metabolic disorders related to bad nourishment. The words of Eugene Genovese, the existence of specific hungers, dangerous deficiencies, and unidentified form of malnutrition might have led to a significant number of slaves to be either physically impaired or chronically ill. If a deficient diet potentially increased the number of sick people and labor absenteeism while planters did not supply a more balanced food ration for their slaves. The answer likely lies on economic motifs, since the cost of slave living expenses represented the most important share of plantation budget. They also said 80% of the value of an estate was the slaves. The slaves made up 80% of the value of the plantation. Planters had a strong incentives in the short run to cut expenses by feeding by means of standardization of slave diet, which entailed to choose a very restricted range of staple foods. The choice for pork and corn was dictated by practical reasons. They were cheap commodities and easy to store for a long time. Kenneth Stamp rejected this economic explanation, rather suggests that masters did not provide an adequate diet to the slaves because of ignorance before avarice, since they probably were not aware of the advances of dietetic science. Richard Such agreed that Stamp in this point, adding that masters were not interested in spending extra money to provide luxury foods for their workers because they misjudged the potential of a balanced diet in increasing labor productivity. That definitely sounds like ignorant, motherfucker. Yeah, excuse my language, try not to swear on it. But yeah, so like, somebody trying to save money, they don't want to hear nothing about no new high science on nutrition and all types of stuff like that. They're just trying to get that work out. They need those slaves in those fields picking that cotton or doing whatever. And if they could do it on a peck of corn and some salt pork, that's they doing it. That's what he's gonna continue giving them. He's not looking in the future feeding them better. The slaves being strong and actually probably can produce even more product in a short amount of time. So a lot of these slave owners and stuff weren't too smart. I guess they didn't feel the need. Like they said, it's like you're giving them high price stuff. Like somebody that buys cheap dog food. You know what I mean? There's better dog food out there, but they like that dog straight. He look happy, don't he? You know what I'm saying? They're gonna keep giving them crappy dog food instead of giving them decent dog food. Right? The Robert Fogel and Stanley Ingerman time on the cross broke the scholarly consensus on the issue of nutritional deficiencies in slave feeding, criticizing the idea of a monotonous diet as a historical invention based on a wrong reading of the instructions of the masters to their overseers. Oh, damn. Dang it. I need to do that. Yeah, P is crazy, right? I'll put this thing back in there. Yeah. Look at this. Damn. Hold on a second. It's crazy. Man, this is bullshit right here. Oh, 1 second. Screw something. Okay. I want to. Damn it. Hold on, I screwed my screen up, y'all. Give me 1 second. Dang. For me. Okay, now I'm good now. Hold on 1 second. All right. All right. It's bigger. That's crazy. All right. Yeah, this thing gets deeper, P. Wow, we gotta read this thing. Okay, Fogel, Eggers, proceeded to stick with nothing. All right, the premise is what most of the foodstuff produced in the plantations were consumed by people and animals living in the estates. The procedure is straightforward. From the overall food production is subtracted the share consumed by whites. 10% consumed by whites, which is 10%. The grain for animals and meat sold off farms, 30% of beef and 15% of pork. Since the rest of the food was not marketable outside plantations, it is arguable that the residual product was devoted to slave feeding. Method and the finding of Fogel and Egerman attracted a great deal of criticism because they were based upon premises not supported by empirical data. The first criticism came from the economist Richard Solch, who questioned two important pieces of evidence: the sample size and the figures of nutritional content of slave diet. Such criticism can be summarized in three major points. Um, Fogel Egerman used a substantially reduced share of Parker Gallon sample from the agricultural census in 1860 to prove their hypothesis. Indeed, the original sample collected by William Parker and Robert Gallman comprised 5,229 farms. I guess that was. I don't know. Comprises 229 farms from southern U.S., but Fogel Egerman barely extracts data from 77 farms that represents less than 10% of the population surveyed by the original Parker Gallup sample. F&E miscalculated the number of whites living in farms and underestimated their food consumption. Such argues that the figure of white population only excludes the residents of planters' houses, while the rest of whites living in separate residences, such as overseers, did not enter in the statistic. 3, Fogel and Egerman miscalculated the conversion ratio between crop and food output, and between livestock and meat production. Thus, while pork and corn, such asserts that this proportion reaches 82.9. Finally, Richard Sulch recalculated the figure of time in the cross, concluding that the slave diet was monotonous and deficient in many basic nutrients, since more than 2/3 of daily allowances consisted of corn and pork. In 1992, Robert Fogel wrote a reply which further amplifies some points of this book. He found that his former calculation on slave diet gives virtually identical energy values that provided by Richard Sulch. 125 calories. Is that 4,125? I guess it is. Calories and time on the cross versus 4,206 calories in the care and feeding of slaves. Even through the daily allowance seems narrow and monotonous, as Richard Sulch claims, it actually met the nutritional demands on basic nutrients, with exception to riboflavin. The method of calculating an average daily intake of given food checklist offers a false impression of dietetic misbalance, when in fact slave diet greatly varied throughout the year, which probably aided to correct any nutritional deficiency. Likewise, Fogel found that slaves did not fully rely on weekly ration provided by their masters, since they could obtain food by other means. He cited an article on Stephen C. Crawford, who suggests that slaves supplemented the former daily ration by means of opportunistic strategies, such as a cultivative garden plots, hunt, fish, beg, or steal food. Further research made a former slave household by archaeologists and medical anthropologists had confirmed the existence of those. Is a chart here. Those practices aim to improve the customary diet of captives. Table 2 shows the nutritional content of the diet revised by Richard Sulch. Yeah, I could turn the thing here. One second. Turn it. All right, bet. You hear food consumption of American slaves. Fogel Egerman said the pounds per year, 88 pounds of pork. You got 507 pounds of corn per year. So I make 500 calories a day. So, all right, so they would have 4,000 calories per day. Yeah. And this other guy said they would have 4,206. So Fogel and Egram said they would have 4,185 calories per day. In this suit, they have more calories with less food, less pounds of food per year. Huh. I don't know if you like to see. That's the sources are from Such's book Care, 1976. That was page 260. Let's skip over some of this. I'm gonna read all of it. Certain part I want to check out. With your vitamins and stuff. Don't worry, I'm gonna give you guys a link to this. All right, there you go. Other studies demonstrated the malnutrition did not impair all slaves equally, but primarily affected mothers and children. Already, some contemporary witnesses were aware of the dramatic situation, such as Southern planter Thomas Affleck, who asserts that of those slaves born, one half died under 1 year. Richard H. Steckel found that the infant mortality rate among slave population in North America reached an astonishing figure of 350 children per thousand at the first year of life, which even may be greater if stillbirths are counted. Steckel speculates that the high ratio of mortality among newborn and infant slaves was basically caused by overworking of pregnant slave women, since excessive physical work put on women at high risk of having a dangerous pregnancy, and lactation period. A specific consequence was a remarkable increase in the number of cases of a mortal disorder known as sudden infant death syndrome. Even if a slave woman gave birth to a healthy child, the chances of the baby to survive during the first years of life were low due to deficient feeding. For Steckel, the precarious living conditions of expected women and children have an economic implication. Masters wanted to maximize the slave labor by which they were not willing to offer time off for female pregnant slaves or mothers taking care of their babies. This crude cost benefit analysis led to the planners to neglect the specific care for mothers and children, since they were not productive investments in the short run. See? So they didn't worry about the babies, whatever, because they couldn't make them no money. It's going to take them years for them to mature so they can put them to work and actually have them produce. You know what I'm saying? Or put it in a crude way, like earn big keep. You know what I'm saying? They make the money for him. It's not beneficial. So it was like at little concern. That's wow. Philip R.P. Coho and Robert A. McGuire questioned the Steckel argument because of its excessive reliance on economic rationality of planters. For Coho and McGuire, the most plausible explanation of these increasing infant mortality rate is rather the spread of the debilitating disease, malaria and hookworm, that impaired pregnant slave women. The adult people exposed to such diseases generally did not die, but suffered typical debilitating illnesses such as anorexia, anemia, and chronic malnutrition. In the case of expectant mothers, the consequences were devastating not only for their own health, but also for the fetus. Although Cole and McGuire do not offer precise statistics about malaria and hookworm, the fact that both diseases were prevalent in semi-tropical regions in southern U.S. led them to think that a significant share of fertile slave women were not in good health conditions to give birth and rare healthy children. This one. There's a good one in here on the Caribbean also. It's really good. But I'm going to skip over that. Um, mhm. All right. Food is one of the key expenses of any slaveholding since it provided the energy that put in motion human machines in which depended on the fate of vast agricultural enterprises. Not surprisingly, slave feeding was one of the most expensive items in the plantation budget. From all the Americans, it would be expected, therefore, that foodstuff offered to slaves were both plentiful and varied to meet their nutritional requirements. Um, but the historical sources show consistent evidence that slave feeding was not precisely complete and adequate according to modern standards. In order to answer specific questions regarding the nutritional potential of slave diet, historians have had to resort to the collaboration of scholars from other disciplines. In fact, the study of slave feeding is perhaps one of the most productive fields for the interdisciplinary work, since it gathers efforts from several specialists in different sciences such as anthropology, archaeology, medicine, and economy. Even so, there are still obstacles to undertake a research from a more um, ambiguous continental scope. The first one has to do with the disparity of resources devoted to new research. I'm sorry. Indeed, most of the scholarly contributions in matter of slave feeding come from the United States, due to the key importance of slavery in American historiography, and more important, to the generous financial support for research projects in such fields. It is possible to find interesting work for the case of formal English, the case of the former English, French, and Spanish dominions in the Caribbean, and even from Brazil. But the intellectual production in such topic is almost non-existent in the continental Spanish colonies. Even so, I think there are good chances of undertaking a periodic study that embraces all regions of the Americas, thanks to the increasing number of new scholarly publications related living conditions of slave population. Second major obstacle is the disparity of data collected from historical sources. Since the slaveholding management style was highly diverse throughout the Americas, the data from plantation records related to feeding and physical conditions of slaves may show considerable differences. This is particularly problematic in the case of quantitative data regarding to physical indexes, sex, age, height, and origin, or specific qualities of foodstuffs and slave diet. The fact that the English planter kept a more careful, detailed record of the chattel slaves that their Portuguese or Spanish counterparts would explain the relative success of cliometric studies about slavery in the United States and former English Caribbean colonies in comparison with the poor quantitative production in Latin America. I'm going to skip over that. Okay. The fact that slave rations were monotonous did not imply that it was not nutritious. As a matter of fact, scholars have found that slave diet in the United States and Caribbean might have met the energy requirements and even the recommended daily allotment of proteins. However, there was evidence about the deficiency of key nutrients in the daily ration, which might have caused some diseases such as beriberi, pellagra, and night blindness. It would be a mistake to consider that the slaves accepted with resignation their usually poor diet allotment and rather they resorted to different means to get food. Work in their own garden plots to cultivate vegetables and fruits that they could trade in local market, beg and steal food, hunt and fish, and so forth. It is demonstrated that they actively employed strategies to increase their provisions of foodstuff, which became a necessary supplement for the monotonous diets. Making use of the evidence of slave heights, the scholars drew the conclusion that the United States slaves were better fed than the counterparts in the Caribbean. Remarkably, the U.S. slaves were also taller than the American and European free workers in the 19th century. This famous antebellum puzzle reveals the profound changes in the distribution of income during the first stage of industrialization, which led to the pauperization of the working classes in cities. But the slave living conditions remain the same. Unfortunately, we do not have a study of Brazilian slave heights, which could help to compare the physical conditions of Brazilian slaves in comparison with the slaves in North America and the Caribbean. Finally, there is plenty of evidence to state that malnutrition affected basically the infant and children slaves to be dependent on the milk of their mothers, who surely were underfed, led many children to suffer different illnesses, which would explain the high rate of infant mortality among the slave population in the Americas. If those slave if those slave societies were unable to raise enough children to maintain demographic vitality, it would make necessary to increase the importation of African slaves. However, the ability of newcomers to reproduce themselves was inferior to that of local population, which inevitably led to a drop in the rate of growth. The United States was the only country where the slave population increased during the 19th century, although its rate of infant mortality was quite high. Even so, further research must be done to answer many questions regarding the interesting topic of the slave diet in the Americas. All right, get y'all this link here. Left out a lot of parts, so you guys can get y'all read on and stuff. I'm gonna spoil it for you. Right. Right. Hey, what's up, Star? What's up, Star? All right, here's that link. All right. Mm-hmm. I might read. Oh, what up? Folk be up in here? What's up, man? Thanks for stopping by. Yep. Take this information. Whatever you can do with it. It's interesting though that like the different views of it. Because we've been taught that we only eat chitlins and shit. Like, you know what I mean? And it would make sense for a smart businessman to feed their slaves adequate food, like, you know what I mean? For them, for one, for their health, but most important to the slave master is for them to produce that product. You know what I mean? So that's heavy. I don't know why I'm trying to eat now. Sorry about that. Another spot. Um, oh shit. Milk sounds pretty good. It's food that they gave the people in Brazil and stuff. Caribbean. Um, or something too. They were saying how um, the slave master will give them um, liquor to keep rebellion off the slave's mind. Let's see if I can find that. Um, shit. Hmm. One second. Shit. Keep doing the same damn thing. Okay. One second. See if I can find that. Um, all right, here we go. This is one of the parts here. Um, one second. Right here. Over here somewhere. Um, this part. Alcohol. That would actually be alcohol. Mm, what else? Ooze. Might be good though. And this is bullshit. Um, um, economic historian Kenneth Kipple reconstructed the Caribbean slave diet on base of several sources. Instructions from overseers, travel accounts, slave care treaties, and so forth, coming to the conclusion that its composition was quite similar to that of the U.S. Southern slaves. The typical daily ration comprised a portion of animal protein, beef or fish, a portion of cereal, corn or rice, and tropical vegetable supplements, taro, yam, bananas, and plantains. These feeding patterns is clearly noticeable in British colonies where In words of the English medical doctor Pinkert, 1796, the food of the Negroes is very simple and but little variety. Breakfast, dinner, and supper being similar throughout the year. It consists mostly of guinea corn with a small bit of salt meat or salt fish. Sometimes the captives were granted with stimulants such as tobacco, molasses, and rum to award their hard working and labor discipline. The table 4 shows a nutritional estimation of typical daily slave diet in the Caribbean region. Did this standardized diet meet the nutritional demands of Caribbean slaves? Based on the means and nutritional requirements for the adult male worker, Kippel analyzed the specific dietary value of typical daily slave ration, coming to the following results. A, the basic food allowance included all key macronutrients. B, there was a moderate deficit in essential elements such as calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin B2. And C, it was detected a very low intake of fat, which impairs the absorption of 2 key soluble vitamins, vitamin A and vitamin B1. The lack of vitamin A was responsible for the high rate of night blindness among some Caribbean slave populations, and for the inability to digest. For the inability to digest certain proteins of animal origin. On the other hand, the chronic shortage of vitamin B led to it, and Kippel suggests that reliance on feeding based on rice could have been linked to the notable prevalence of beriberi in certain regions of the Caribbean. Drones and Handler and Robert E. Socorusini also found physical traces of feeding disorders related to specific nutrient deficiencies of the slave population of Barbados. Well, I was gonna get the hell on out of here. Oh wait, this was good. They were saying that I'll let y'all read it. I'll just tell y'all about it. Was saying that the African slaves, their diet in their homeland was considerably less than what they were eating here. I wouldn't say less, but just as malnutrition. I think that was in this article. It was saying that and this came when I was studying, when I was saying the sub-Saharan didn't know what a wheel was into the 1800s, right? I don't know if y'all remember I did that video. This kind of ties in with that too. It was saying that about reason why a reason for not having a wheel or not making use of the wheel is because the climate and where they were. There weren't any roads, so wheels were kind of being not good of use on like unpaved roads and stuff like that, right? Which they didn't have in sub-Saharan Africa, right? So what I was saying with this about them being malnutrition and stuff, they lived off of like loose vegetation and stuff. It wasn't like in like roots. Now, meat, they didn't consume a lot of meat because meat was hard to get. Like unless it was like maybe like a small creature or something like that. They didn't have livestock. And the reason, like I said with the wheel, they didn't have an animal to pull the cart. You know what I'm saying? They didn't have domesticated animals like they had in Northern Africa, right? They didn't have the goat herder. They wasn't herding goats and stuff. And to this day, they don't have livestock in those areas because of the disease that the animals get very fast. For one, being on top of each other like that in that climate in that area, and with like mosquitoes and bugs and stuff like that would give like the animals like diseases. What was it, the tsetse fly or something they mentioned? would kill all the animals any motherfucker. So it didn't make sense. Or you just couldn't domesticate animals out there. They didn't have that. So that's kind of like with us, they didn't have like, you know what I'm saying, like livestock to be eating meat like all the time. So their diet was this is what we were talking about here. Yeah, therefore, any study about nutritional background of African-born slaves in the Caribbean will date back to their former feeding regimen on their motherland. They scatter evidence in such matter suggests that Western Africans relied on poor vegetarian diet consisting of taro, yam, millet, rice, bananas, cassava, and corn. It seemed likewise that consumption of food from animal origin, such as meat and milk, was rare due to the biological obstacles to raising cattle and the intolerance of lactose in many African American populations. As a result of this poor dietary regime, Western African populations lived permanently under threat of famine. The situation got worse during Atlantic Passage because of awful sanitary conditions and the extreme poor daily ration consists of boiled rice and salted fish. Not surprisingly, most African slaves show clear sign of chronic malnutrition upon their arrival of Caribbean islands. Once in the Caribbean, African-born captives came to occupy the lower strata of the colonial social ladder, which was mirrored in the nutritional differences with regard to the Creole counterparts. Using an index of stature, B.W. Hickman found a remarkable trend of slave populations. Most colored Caribbean slaves were taller than these from African origin. The data from Cuba and Trinidad back this hypothesis by the equation of slightly different in the case of Guyana. The fact that Creole blacks were children or grandchildren of Africans would indicate that the height trend was quickly established. David Eltis notes that this gap in the stature of black population to both sides of the Atlantic is observable even today. The most plausible explanation to this divergence in matter of height is the extreme food insecurity in Africa. Conversely to the situation of American captives, the African population sometimes experienced periods of severe food shortage that eventually, I screwed up. Shit. I lost my spot. I'll take my ass home now. Lost the spot. Totally missed where I was. I just leave it at that. Everybody say anything in the chat. Right on, man. No problem. No problem. So I don't know. Like it don't show. Like when I watch these videos over or something like that, I usually don't see the chat in there. I don't know why, because I check the thing to show the chat on the replay, but I don't know why it doesn't do it. So I'm just going to continue to keep putting the links in the chat though. So if you don't watch it and shit, you don't get it. You know what I'm saying? If you watch it late, it's late. Motherfucking shit, you gotta catch that motherfucker when I drop. So I don't think I'm gonna put it in the regular comments. So with that, like I said, Witch Fighter General, Killer B. What else been going on? I don't know. I got some more shit for y'all. I know I've been lacking and stuff. I haven't been doing shit lately. But that don't mean I ain't been thinking about shit. So I got a ton of shit I want to do. I just gotta get time to do it now. I'm very busy. But with that, Thanks everybody for coming by. Sister P, thank you stopping by. Always good to see you here. It's a star. Hope you coming on in here. You gotta come. You gotta bring your ass on up. Yeah, if anybody will come in here, say a couple days while I close up. I'll put the link up. Oh, snap. Thanks, P. Oh, she already got everybody up in there. She always does. Thanks to all the viewers for hanging out with us. Shout out to the faces like Lions. I didn't see him. I didn't see that person. See the man. All right, thank you for coming by, and Star. Thank you for coming by. And yeah, P. Shout out to my man Willie Grits. Shout out to my man Willie Grits. You know what I'm saying? Y'all don't know Willie Grits is a frequent member on here. Like, you catch a lot of my earlier videos and stuff. You see him on the live streams and stuff. Willie Grits this passed on and stuff last month. Oh, yeah, so and keep this thing alive for Willie Grits. So take care of yourself, your families, and love yourselves. Stay out that damn coat. That's right. Stay out the motherfucking coats. Socialize safely and research everything. That's right. That's right. Yeah, let me put this nigga up in here. All right. So I'll give it a little after you upload it. It will show the chat. Yeah. So, but sometimes I go to check it out like days later and I don't be seeing it. But maybe, I don't know. Thank you, P. Yeah, thank you, Star, for coming by. There's a link. Anybody want to come in? If not, check this thing on down. I want to do another video. Oh yeah, like I said, the slaves at Harvard. I'll probably do that one next. Another one. I got a debate I'm supposed to do. I canceled it, but I got to set a new date for it. This dude King Seth, he want to debate me on are the rulers of the Moorish Empire black? He's gonna get his boots smoked. But that's gonna be the beginning of my new campaign and shit that I'm gonna be doing and shit. I'm gonna be fucking up all these Afrocentrics. Well, I've always been fucking up all the Afrocentrics, but I want to fuck up all the Afrocentrics. I want to fuck them all up by fucking them up on that goddamn Egypt shit. Goddamn Egypt shit. We gotta stop trying to take people's culture and shit. One culture we're gonna take is eating chicken. But yeah, we gotta stop taking people's culture. We claim it ours and shit. But there's more debate. I'm gonna knock that nigga boots off. He's gonna be mad about it. And it's not just gonna be the Moors mad about that shit. There's gonna be a whole bunch of motherfuckers mad about that shit, yo. This information I got, I might leak some of it before the debate. There's no way he could beat me. There's absolutely no possible way he could beat me. Like, there's no way out of it. Like, he already lost. This with the title itself, it kills it. But I don't smoke his motherfucking boots. And it's a lot of stuff that, like I said, even with this topic I did tonight, there's a lot of stuff that we just take and like claim that shit like it's ours. And that shit don't be ours. It be somebody else's shit. But we just be taking that shit and doing what the fuck we want. Like, not giving a fuck. That shit is crazy. We gotta stop that shit. But that's what's been going on. And when you see that more shit that I do, man, y'all motherfuckers can be some mad motherfuckers, yo. We ain't had shit to do with that shit. I can let a little bit of this shit out, right? When y'all see them motherfucking black Moors, those paintings and shit like that. Well, y'all saw my other Moor video. Y'all search Moors on my Moorish or whatever on my channel. You'll see it. I talk the true history of the Moors or the Moors and all that shit. Half of them make the paintings is fictional pictures, right? Then there's other ones. The black Moors were like the elite soldiers at one point, right? And they also was used to govern the Berber, and Arab people and Caucasian people. They were used by the Berber and the Arab caliphs, the sultans, whatever you want to call them, right? They was used by them as like patrolmen. Like up until recently, it might be still called the Black in Morocco. The elite soldiers are called the Black Guard. Those are the people that guard the palace. Those are motherfuckers that are like the Secret Service, right? They're called the Black Guard. And there were slaves that were taken from the Sub-Saharan. They were taken as slaves and made soldiers. When you see these black Moors, ain't none of them motherfuckers was ruling nothing. They wasn't ruling nothing. They were soldiers. They worked for the government as slaves. And they used them as patrolmen, like how you would have a police officer, right? Patrolling the neighborhood. Now, you won't put a black cop around a bunch of black citizens. Why? Because they would start to befriend each other and say, hey, that dude you working for is a piece of shit. And then the guard would be like, well, yeah, you right, he is a piece of shit, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, whatever. Next thing you know, that guard might have some type of sympathy on the people and might join the people to overthrow the government. So what they put in place, a crispy black motherfucker that don't look nothing, excuse my language, I'm sorry. They don't look nothing like the people where they patrolling at. And the people already hate them or look at, not say hate, but look at them as a lower class because of where they come from and the way they look. They already look down upon. But ain't nobody gonna say nothing to that black crispy ass dude because he worked for the motherfucking sultan, for the caliph. He worked for him. You know what I'm saying? So, like, when we see this, these are people that were working for them. And the majority of the soldiers and stuff for the Moorish Empire were Berber. That's who they were. And like white servants, white slaves too. They was fighting for the Moors. Just the black Moors are just a small portion. And where we might see a sultan that had a sub-Saharan or Negro, whatever you want to call it, traits, he was born from a slave. His mama was a slave, a concubine, and got the favor of his father. But he's not considered a sub-Saharan. All you gotta do is you can look at the paintings. They got paintings of the wars. They got all types of stuff on both sides. Look it up. And like you got, I'm gonna leave that for the debate. Leave that shit for the debate. I'm getting my ass on out of here. Finish eating this chicken, and mozzarella sticks and shit. I think I done ate all my mozzarella sticks. I'm kind of mad about that. So, there's gonna be some mozzarella. I got these whack ass waffle fries and shit. Waffle fries, nasty. Then if the motherfuckers, oh god damn. Then if the motherfuckers get old, this shit, the motherfuckers get all crunchy, the motherfuckers fuck you up. Damn, I'm cussing and stuff. Let me get out of here. I'm cussing. Let me get out of here. All right, y'all. Thank y'all for coming by. And I'm gonna hit y'all with that Josh track going around here called Shine, Shine, Shine. Killer B, the goddamn witch finder general. You got a witch. I'll burn their asses up every time. I can swear on that part. I can say I'll burn their ass up. I'll say that all day. Leave all the extra stuff alone. Peace, y'all.
I know what it is. Yeah. Feel the pressures of everyday living. Yeah. Wondering what a system will be given. Driven to do better. Break us from these chains and fetters. Regretter when I could have did something positive. And I didn't. Like many out here swimming. Gotta not drown. Realize power in your crown. Understand and teach. Wipe away the little child's frown. You know how I get down. Bring the truth. Tighten what's loose. Spread mercy. Even if you refuse. We got breath. We got next. We got Jew. Written throughout numerous generation texts. I don't need to be like, but there will be respect. Yes, sir. Talk with your highness on the daily. Tell me workplace is crazy. I say unite and do something amazing. Caught up in your emotions, you get lazy. Get lazy. Don't want to become the devil's plaything. They say Josh is a Christian. They say he lacked power-wide vision. Y'all done changed descriptions. Moses water drop. Nourishing my crops, saving lots, respect the Dama on top. Y'all lost, that's why I'm biding my time. You know it's filthy crime. You should respect the mind, the grind, as we better our economy. Do it. Transform the party system folly. No illegal robbing. I get judicial as a nation. I don't care if you choose plants or bacon. Still gonna feel these changes. Still rearranging scenery, gunnery. Canaries honoring, prepare me. Lose you devils with a well-placed rhyme. Suleiman was the drop lines go well with my lily koi produce. Expose you fools who continue to want the nukes. You approach with caution like I'm a moose. We're really on your own island like goose. Prepare for the onslaught. Niburu in the malt drop. Drink it, pour it out on the new nation. Magnetic field shifting.
What up, Rudy? You late, Rudy? You late, goddamn. I hope you was tuning in, though. I hope you was watching the background, though. But shout out to you, too, man. Rudy, my man. So, yeah, y'all, gonna head the fuck on out of here before I start, you know what I'm saying, cussing and stuff. So, peace, Killer B, the goddamn Witchfinder General. Yeah, I wish I burn their asses up. Later, y'all. Bye-bye, P.